Gosh, we are late. It's all swamp. I'm gonna wear my glasses.
I'd like to bring the regular meeting for Monday, April 4th of the Hamilton Township Committee to order. Please rise for the flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law by posting a notice of this meeting on the bulletin board in the municipal building and by faxing notice of the meeting to the Atlantic City Press, Star Ledger, Camden Courier, and Atlantic County Record on January the 7th, 2022. Mr. Cheek?
Here.
Ms. Hopkins?
Here.
Mrs. Link?
Here.
Mr. Patali?
Here.
Mayor Kane?
Here. All right. Next, I'd ask you to join me for a moment of silence for private reflection. All right, we'll move on to guest presentations. Safety on the agenda. It's going to be presented by Joe Henry. He's from Hardenberg Insurance Company. Joe?
Stand up, however works for you.
If you just need to go to the microphone, however.
Okay, all right. Good evening. I'm here to present a safety topic, as I do every year, as a requirement as a member of the Atlantic GIF. This year's topic I have selected slips, trips, and falls primarily because that's where the money is. So don't be intimidated by this. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes. I'm going to skip through this very quickly. As always, we'd like to recognize your safety committee with Lisa serving as your safety coordinator, Sarah as your claims coordinator, and I was just informed that Mr. Koseki is now your fund commissioner. So I will let you know that your safety committee is very active, they are engaged, and I can tell you, because I do attend them at times, they're very entertaining. And also they do a wonderful job. So to let you know the results of 2021, you did qualify for the 2750 that's shown on the next page. Thanks to your safety committee, you did receive that award. And the other items here, the GIF will give you for your membership. So on page 5, I'm just going to focus primarily on 3 spots here, why they occur, why slips, trips, and falls do occur. I'm going to show you that they are preventable, and I'm also going to show you how the GIF can help. So I'm going to skim over to page 9 now, and I'm going to show you the impact to employers and employees both. The impact to the employer, you'll have a loss of productivity in business, possible increase in insurance premiums, and I can assure you that if it's that bad, it's not a possibility. Your premiums are going to go up. Additional costs associated with training or hiring a replacement worker. Needless to say, when somebody's out of work, it's a strain on the rest of the workforce. The impact to the employee, there's lost wages and out-of-pocket expenses along with pain and suffering, temporary or permanent disability as possible, quality of life change, and also in some cases depression and death do occur. I'm going to advance again. You can look over the other information there after that as far as what causes slip, trips, and falls, but I'm going to move to page 19. And show you where we can prevent those. We can design a workplace to prevent exposures and hazards, maintaining good housekeeping, which is essential to avoid slips, trips, and falls. Declutter your areas, establish safe walking routes, contain fluids in oil pans and drip pans. You want to provide adequate lighting. You want to mark curbs where there's elevation changes, and you also want to ensure handrails are in good working order and properly in place. On the next page, I'm sorry, that was 18. On page 19, I've got some lessons learned here from losses. I'm going to highlight 2 of them. The first one, where it shows an employee tripped over a bag in an aisle causing a fall. That employee suffered several injuries, as you can see, a knee injury, fractured teeth, and required spinal surgery. The cost of that claim was a staggering $360,000. From that township established a policy prohibiting anything in the aisles and conducted weekly inspections of facilities which weren't being done at the time, which your safety committee does in fact make sure that that happens. I did want to point out that these accidents happened within the GIF, however, none of these were related to your facilities.
Thank you for
And the
making
bottom
that
one,
clarification.
this employee fell from a ladder attempting to remove a wall bracket. That employee suffered life-threatening injuries and never returned to work, unfortunately. That claim was $900,000, and after that, the employees were given annual ladder training, which is an OSHA requirement. That hadn't been done prior to that. So that's kind of what your safety committee does. Sue does a great job with the JIF, and I'll get into these items, making sure that they're up to date with their proper training through OSHA. So what can the JIF do for you to help out? I've got that contained right here. They give you online classes pertaining to any safety-related topic. Slip, trips, and falls are included in there. Next page, they've got a library of DVDs. You got those down days where the employees in Public Works can't get out to work. They can put the DVDs on and do some training there. And the last 3 pages are safety bulletins. I've got one here. I've showed this here because I've seen this in more than one case. I've seen employees take a chair, put it on top of a table desk, which is not a good thing to do. It's highly recommended. But when you put one up there with wheels, it just magnifies things worse, and nothing good happens. I've seen incidents where this has happened, and as I said, nothing good happens. Next, we've got a ladder safety bulletin. I mentioned ladder training previously. And the last one is a Mel safety bulletin on managing slips, trips, and falls during winter months, which we bombard everybody with that. Fortunately, winter's behind us, but we will definitely see spikes in slips, trips, and falls in the winter months. So that is all at your resources as a member of the JIF. That concludes this year's safety topic. If there's anything you'd like to know related to the safety program, any questions, please feel free to ask.
Committee, question or comments? Joe, I thank you for your presentation. I thank you for being brief, and it sounds like we're doing a good job here. We just need to remain
Excellent.
vigilant.
Excellent.
Thank
Great
you.
safety program.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, at this point, we'll move on to addition, deletion of late agenda items to be considered for action tonight. We have 6C, resolution authorizing acceptance of proposal for grant writing services, Millennium Strategies LLC, not to exceed $10,000. 7O, resolution in support of and authorizing the submission of a grant application under the FY23 Economic Development Initiative, Department of Housing and Urban Development. And 12, executive session, McCormick LLC, and cybersecurity and insurance coverage. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion. I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Next, we'll move on to early public comment on agenda items. Do we have anyone?
We do, sir.
Joe? Mr. Rogers?
Harry Rogers, 1069 Morningside Drive. There's 2 items on the agenda tonight that I think require some explanation,
Okay.
particularly 5B, the ordinance that's dealing with the floodplain management, to adopt a whole new floodplain management. Now, typically, when you go through the agenda, you go through it quickly, and some of these things don't get a proper explanation. I think we need to hear an explanation on that, along with 7E, Echo, resolution amending resolution confirming the official cash management plan for the Township of Hamilton. The consent agenda oftentimes is passed en masse, and there's no information as to what these particular items actually are. So if you would explain those 2 when they come up on the agenda, I'd be most appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry. All right. If there's no one else, we'll move on to discussions. Early public comment. I'm sorry, discussions A, Planet Civic.
I can address that for you, Mayor.
Please.
The Township is excited to partner with a company called Planet Civic. It is a social engagement platform for residents and businesses alike. It's to use as a multitude of outreach options. The first is a public poll. It's similar to a non-binding referendum in which the Township can gauge opinions of projects. And the second aspect of this is that the platform is a volunteer engagement tool to increase volunteerism throughout the town. It allows civic organizations to post and request volunteer opportunities, And then, once you have those volunteers, you can recognize them on the platform, thank them, and grow your volunteers as such. So we're very excited about to increase volunteerism, increase constructive dialogue by allowing a forum that has positive civic engagement. So additionally to that, we are receiving Sustainable Jersey points for this, along with the Green Team, and we are using our Clean Communities grant money to pay for this. So it's an engagement tool, volunteer tool that is going to be at no cost to the taxpayer.
Sounds good. Sounds great. Any questions or comments, committee? Joe, do you need
Sounds
action
good.
from us on this, or you?
No, sir. It's a civic engagement tool. We already have them, so we're good. Thank you.
I do have one question. Joe, do you have a pilot project that you'd like to use this software on?
Well, we have a few of them. I think roads is definitely one of them. And then any other initiative. These are several tools in which you can just put questions out to the public. So if there's any wedge issues, certain things you want to put out there to gauge the temperature of the town, you can do that.
So,
Joe, how will we put that out there?
Yeah.
How will the public gain access to it?
So this is the best part about that. It's a social media aspect, but it's not Facebook, okay? It's much different, whereas this is for residents and businesses where you register through the site, through Planet Civic. They confirm whether you're a resident or a business owner in the town. That way you're not from another state through Facebook who doesn't have any interest and they're just trying to, start trouble, like keyboard warriors, right? So this allows people to register. We confirm they're an actual resident or an actual business through the town, so that way your voice matters and it carries credibility. As well as when you make comments, it's more constructive. It's more of a civic engagement tool rather than anything else.
So how do we go about using it?
Oh, sorry. So it's planetcivic.com. We will have a link on our own website, and when you go to their website, it's a vendor. You'll log on just like any other social media aspect, but you have to register through them. They confirm you as a resident and a business. So it's just a standard platform like a social media account.
Then how do we reach out to the public? How do you go about, how does this tool?
We notify everybody of that. We'll be using all of our social media, our Nixle, to get it out there to make sure everybody's aware of this.
Okay.
now, how is this program paid for?
Through Clean Communities grants and through Sustainable Jersey. So our Green Team will actually get Sustainable Jersey points for this as well.
Okay, good.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for bringing it to us, and I think it's going to be a very useful tool, so thank you. All right, we'll move on to B, Park Road status update. Sue?
Just to kind of give everybody an update on Park Road, we have met internally as a group. We are continuing on looking at sidewalks. There's going to be a survey going out and questions to the residents. Joe, do you happen to have a timetable on when that survey and questions are going to go out?
We're meeting with department heads to go through, making sure we have the map and everything else, so we're going to solidify that. We don't have a time frame. I would say within 2 weeks we want that out there.
Okay, so within the next couple of weeks, we'll give you more of an update, but look for a letter to come out. We're looking for some feedback from each of the residents on Park Road, specific to the sidewalks and easements and things of that nature, and it'll be coming out under Joe's signature. Okay.
Oh, yeah, they will be specifically asking if they're in favor of sidewalks, number one, and number two, if they will be acceptable to easements. So there is a very specific thing, and we urge everyone on Park Road to respond, because it is your voice that is very important to this whole thing moving on. Now, once that is established, then what is the next step, Sue? To the Pinelands? Or no, to our engineers, right?
Yeah, I think once we figure out what our plan of attack is, then we can kind of come up with some conceptual designs to fit whatever we need.
And then they would be submitted to the Pinelands?
Yes, Pinelands would definitely have to be part of the whole
Okay.
equation.
All right.
Well, I think it's a great way to do it. I mean, let's get buy-in from the stakeholders. Let's see what their opinion is. I think it's a great start to get the letter out. Let's get their opinion, gauge that, and then see how we move forward at that point. Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you. 4, public hearing, adoption of ordinance. First, we'll start with ordinance number 1984, 2022. This is an ordinance to vacate portion of Columbia Avenue described by meets and bounds and located in the Township of Hamilton, State of New Jersey. Committee, this is, like we see often, it's a paper street that there's been a request to vacate it.
What is the reason for vacating it?
Well, it would be at the request of one of the landowners on either side, Ms. Link.
Okay.
So, and as you know, with the vacation, half would go to the landowners on one side and half would go to the other.
Does that mean that we don't have to plow that street, or have no responsibility for that?
It's all wooded right now.
What?
It actually doesn't exist. The plans for it to go through are there, but they've been on the books for, like many of these, for decades. It will probably never be improved, but I don't know that, but, you know, the likelihood of it is
It's not a street at all?
no, it's
No
wooded
gravel?
area with the plans that at some point when they laid out the planning and zoning in that area, that the intent was that it may go to something at that point, but it never has, so.
Yeah, I sort of think that, well, I'm looking at the shed that is close to that vacated street, and in light of what has happened with sheds that are close to a street, you know, it would be an issue if it became a street.
Well, the only way it would be an issue is, you know, they would gain an additional 25-foot of property line from where that shed is, so if they had to get a variance to put the shed there, they may become in compliance with the extra property, so, I mean, that's the only way. It wouldn't negatively impact it, it could only positively impact it.
Okay, yeah. All right.
I'll motion.
I have a motion.
Wait,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments before I open to the public? Hearing none, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak on this matter? Mr. Carrigan, please.
I noticed on a tax map, there's a Columbia Avenue about 2 miles west of Columbia Road.
Okay.
This would be on Oak Street.
Is that Pine? Pine? Isn't it Pine?
Pine.
Fine. The
It's a
information
Columbia-
that's provided to us, Jim, shows it on Pine Street.
Okay.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, and also goes 1 block west of Oak on the tax map. The block number is 863, by the way. 863.
663.
It does not
Well,
go.
Block 863 is a considerable distance away from what we're being provided with
It's
here.
not Columbia that runs parallel with 50.
No.
This is
No, it's not.
861.
No.
Okay. Because this Columbia does not run towards Oak. It runs towards Birch off of Pine.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer your questions, Jim?
Yeah, I tried to buy land back there many years ago, but I couldn't buy it because I'd have to put the road through.
Right.
And you're talking about at least $100,000.
I get it. Yep.
$90 a ton, so, for blacktop, so. So, okay,
Well, we
thanks.
appreciate it, Jim. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else in the public that wishes to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public portion, please.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second?
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Committee, questions, comments, motion?
Motion?
I have a motion.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Cheek, second by Mr. Vitale. Rita, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
We'll move on to ordinance 1985-2022. This is an ordinance to vacate a portion of 6th Street described by meets and bounds and located in the Township of Hamilton. very similar. The supporting documentation's here in your packet. It's been reviewed in-house. It's up here for your review. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public portion.
Motion.
I have a motion.
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Committee,
Aye.
what's your pleasure?
I'll move ordinance 1985, 2022.
Motion by Mr. Patali. Second by Ms. Hopkins. Rita, roll call, please.
Which is what? Oh, Lucy.
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins? Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Patali?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
All right, we'll move on to 4C. This is 1986-2022. This is an ordinance to amend ordinance number 1346-99, as amended, entitled, "An Ordinance Implementing the Emergency Services Volunteer Length of Service Award Program, better known as LoSAP, pursuant to NJSA 40A: to replace LoSAP point system for firefighters set forth in Exhibit A in the attached ordinance 1346-99."
So moved.
I have a motion, well, actually, this is a
This is,
point. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public portion, please. I have a motion by Ms. Hopkins,
Second.
second by Mr. Cheek. Rita, I'm sorry, all in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
All right. Now we'll go on. Any questions or comments, committee? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Link,
Second.
second by Ms. Hopkins. Rita, roll call on that, please.
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins? Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Patali?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
All right, we will move on to introduction of ordinance. The public hearing for these will be held on April 18th, 2022. Firstly, we have ordinance 1987-2022. This is a reintroduction. It's an ordinance to amend ordinance 1963-2021, entitled Ordinance of the Township of Hamilton adopting an amendment to the redevelopment plan for the entirety of the township, County of Atlantic, State of New Jersey, to permit cannabis establishments, distributors, and delivery services. All right, we've had some discussion in this in the past. Committee, you want to open up the conversation of what you may or may not want to do with this?
Yep.
I have noticed that in each area, there are a delineation of 4 possible sites, which, if you count up the agricultural, the forest area, the design commercial, and the highway commercial, we're looking at 12 possible sites. And I think that should be reduced to 6. I mean, yeah.
Mrs. Link, this is not increasing the classes or the amount of uses that we'll have. This is designating how they'll be dealt with in each one of those locations.
It says
Aaron, how many
it says
classes-
4 licensed businesses shall be permitted in each of those areas.
No, but in totality, the maximum we have right now is how many, Aaron? That would-
14.
Could be,
Yes, it's 4 in each zoning jurisdiction, and that number was increased to make room and accommodate for those residents who may be interested in opening micro businesses.
So
In
in
the initial-
totality, how many?
What's,
4 times 3 or
16, 4 times 4?
16?
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, not that they're all going to be
well,
filled.
Right.
how many are being approved by the state?
The state, for cultivation, standard cultivation, the state will be approving 37
In
Statewide.
the state of New Jersey?
statewide.
And is that split up evenly throughout the state, north, central, and south?
Yes. So the likelihood that there will be 4 of them in Hamilton Township is, it's very unlikely.
The fact, repeat that, please.
The likelihood that all of the South Jersey licenses will be here is unlikely.
So there's a possibility of 13 right now in the southern half of the state in totality.
I believe so.
Ms. Link has a concern. How we want to handle that?
I agree with Ms. Link. What if we were to, I know we're talking micro business. What happens if we cut it in half, and then if we get an exceptional amount of interest, we take it back up? Like, what's the flexibility we have in this ordinance?
That's a legal question.
Okay. Oh, I thought it was illegal to ask it. I was doing, oh, okay, I'll do that. And what's the recommendation, Emily, in terms of, can we do a range? Can we do like a parametric range of 12 to 16, or do we have to have a hardcore number in the ordinance?
Well, this is an up to. It's not a requirement that you shall grant 4 licenses. So you have flexibility there anyway. If you have someone who is a very qualified applicant who is licensed by the state and they have an appropriate location, and then you get a second one and you also have a micro business, and all of these applicants are vetted and they are highly qualified and would be assets to the Township of Hamilton, you have the ability to grant those, enter into redevelopment agreements and have them operate in the township. You don't have to allow that many in the township. So there's your flexibility.
Here's my concern. We have 3 liquor stores within a half a mile, and we have 4 hairdressers on Main Street. We don't have a really good track record of controlling our assets. I'm putting my cards on the table, folks.
Well, this is through a redevelopment process. So any applicant would have to enter into a redevelopment agreement with the township. And therefore, you have a very different level of control over who and where these businesses are located. The marketplace governs the other.
Yes.
And so here you have a different level of control, which is why when committee made the determination that they were going to move forward with allowing cannabis businesses, that's why it was done through the redevelopment plan process, and to require a redevelopment agreement so that you have those levels of control that you may not otherwise have if you simply allowed it in your retail corridor. This requires that redeveloper, applicant, operator to work with the committee and ensure that they are following the.
Is there a way to control the 4 and say, we'll have 4 of which 2 must be micro? In other words, I am a big proponent of small business and micro, but I don't want 4 big businesses coming in when we stood it up for 4. So if we're going to hang with the 4, could we say like 2 big and 2 small? Like, let's.
So the way it's written is that it is no more than 4 of each class shall be permitted, with a maximum of 2 being micro licenses.
So we're already there.
So it's not quite the way you're suggesting. You're suggesting 2 of the standard licenses and 2 micro licenses.
Yeah.
A maximum of those 4 licenses can be micro business. We're not going to have 4 micro businesses. We can have 4 licenses, 2 of which can be. What
if we change the terminology and we set a maximum of 4,
I don't
of
think
which
you-
2 must be minimum? Judy, does that make a difference? What do you think?
Just so you know, the micro businesses
For
can
instance,
convert.
there is a leeway for having 16 cannabis here, correct?
Correct. That is
Okay.
the maximum number that can be permitted.
All right. So what is to prevent us from going to the maxim?
That's great.
Well, I think.
Just, in view of the money that is to be made and blah, 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 I think that we should look at 2 per area, not 4. That's whether it's micro, whether it's large. That's my opinion, okay? I think that, it's something to be really very much pondered over and to find out, like where these are going to be. We have no idea, right, except in a general area. So, I mean, we can amend it if we feel as though there is a need. Can we, as Sue said, can we go back and amend it?
This in fact is an amendment.
Okay.
So
but
we can
amend and
continue,
amend?
there's no limit on how, and as we progress, the reason that we're here with this amendment
Ye-
is because the Pinelands had issues with the original draft, and so we need to amend it a second time. And so we have that flexibility.
So if we amend it, then it has to go back to the Pinelands, right?
It has to go back to the
Go
Pinelands,
back
yes.
to the Pinelands if it's amended.
May I ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
Of course, thank you.
Emily, if I may.
Sure.
Isn't the real protection and control in the fact that this is a redevelopment ordinance?
Yes, that's why we did it this way, so that we could have that extra level of control over who and what. The township has the ability to say no.
So at the end of the day, committee, how many go where is up to you. Some could go nowhere, but you can go up to 4 if you agree to a future redevelopment plan, which you don't have to. Therein lies the protection.
Well,
Do you understand exactly what he's saying?
yeah, I know what he's saying. It's just like mind-boggling to think that we could have 16 cannabis here in Hamilton Township, and at the maximum amount, okay? And that we don't have to approve any one out of them if we don't really want them in that location or whatever. It opens the door, but it doesn't limit us to certain. But I remember when we had all this to do about bring your own booze for the girly places, that we had many strip joints, so to speak. And the way that we were trying to, curtail them is that they couldn't bring their own booze. And that was a big to-do at one time. So I'm just saying that, I'm looking at the township as a whole, that, let's go to Hamilton Township. They have 16 places where we can pick up our, weed. Or-
And so that's really, not each class of license is permitted in each of these zones. So retail is not permitted in some of these zones. The cultivation is not permitted in some of these zones. So, but to your point about, there's no on-site consumption anywhere. They can't sell, if you're selling retail, you can't sell any kind of food or drink or alcohol or anything like that. It's not going to be a convenience store. That's not the type of, the state is regulating these businesses very stringently between what they're allowed to do and sell as a retail business, and then in terms of their cultivation and distribution and wholesaling, the manufacturing. There are so many safety and security requirements that have been issued by the state that these facilities are very, very secure. And it's very different than the type of business that it's apples to oranges. It's not the same type of a business, and the regulations are very different. And so it's all new, and so everybody has to learn how that is and how that's going to be implemented. But I do want to explain the difference there. It's not the same. There's no on-site consumption of any merchandise.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, again, the number of locations. And what are the regulations? I have no idea. You know what they are. You've seen them or read them or whatever.
There are 197 pages of regulations, probably more now.
197.
So I cannot tell you that I am an expert in all of the regulations. The CRC, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, evaluates each and every applicant and evaluates their business plans. They have to come up with a litany of information and plans and programs for security, for safety, for how they're going to operate their facilities, the different, I just read something today about a potential grow facility where they have an airlock chamber in between the grow area and the general area because they don't want to contaminate the grow area, and so you're not allowed to wear your street clothes, and you have to go into the chamber, and then you have to go into the other areas. So they're very regulated, and these plans and programs, the idea that 16 licensees are going to be operating in Hamilton, I think at this point in time, I can't say that it's not going to happen eventually with the expansion of the number of licenses, but at this point in time, I've only talked to one applicant who's actually been awarded a license, and they are not going to be in Hamilton Township because they couldn't find a location that was in compliance with what the township was looking for. So that's one applicant who was awarded a license who's not coming to Hamilton.
Well, that's comforting.
Is there any other questions?
Is this 197 pages online?
Yes.
Okay. And are we to follow every one of those statutes that are on there in order to award a license?
The township will not be, unless they go through the state process and get awarded a license at the state level, the township does not become involved. The township will go through this process with the redevelopment process, with the redevelopment agreement, and ensure that they are following all of the township requirements through the redevelopment agreement. But without that state-issued license, they can't operate in the township.
And then who comes and inspects them? How often do they be inspected?
I can't answer that question.
It's quarterly, you know?
Well, I know for this particular ordinance with regard to the odor mitigation, they're required to do quarterly odor testing, or if there is a complaint somewhere, then they will be required to test.
Yeah, I know. I read that about Galloway. They were very concerned about Blue Heron Pines having the odor come from Odessa Avenue, Odessa Road. I guess they were, you know. I think they established another committee about it. I don't know whether or not they are adopting the same odor.
I don't believe that they have the same language in their ordinance with regard to odor mitigation, but they have adopted an ordinance very similar in nature in terms of it being a redevelopment plan.
Okay.
And they had the same types of issues with the Pinelands with requiring changes to the ordinance because the Pinelands, after getting the regulations from the CRC, the day after each of the municipalities was required to take action, they looked at the the ordinances that were adopted by the townships and the municipalities, and then made their determinations that certain things needed to be changed because the regulations and their own internal regulations didn't match up. And so they requested these changes.
Oh, okay. All right, well, that's all the questions that I
Very
have.
good questions, and I stand corrected, and I appreciate you bringing that up. There is one level of comfort from us with the fact that the way we wrote our ordinances, that, as we said earlier, any person that wishes to take advantage of one of these licenses would have to enter into a redevelopment agreement, which then gives us, depending on the location, depending on, the size of the operation, we can write into that any standards that we see as a township in order to make it palatable for us. That's the reason why we have the safeguard of the redevelopment agreement. So, if there's one that's approved there already and a second one comes in, the committee may look at it and say, well, we don't want another one there because of the proximity, we want it further away or something of that nature. We always have that flexibility. But when you look at the different zones, my only concern would be, if you're looking at our western side of town in the agricultural district, if farmers out there want to convert to indoor marijuana growing, is it really going to hurt us out in that area? I could see where your concerns would even be more founded when we get into, the industrial business park or the design commercial area or obviously highway commercial. So, I don't see the scenario where you're going to see 16 coming in because I don't think the market's going to support it, and I don't think that we would support it depending on where they are. So,
Okay.
but great question. So.
Okay, Mayor Kane, I did have a question for you, Emily. I look at peanut butter and jelly, and I look at church and school. They just roll off the tongue, and I'm missing the church in the Exhibit B2 in all the examples. I see where we've taken care of the schools, the facilities, the parks, and the recreational, but the religious facilities are missing, and I'm guessing that's probably a typo.
I don't believe that was in the original ordinance.
How do we put it back in? Because I can't imagine peanut butter without jelly.
Of the original.
So-
Yeah, in the original ordinance, it does not list religious, and I think that we talked about that. Some of these religious facilities have events where they have they're serving alcohol and things like that. So I think that was part of the discussion. But if that's the committee's preference, we can put that in.
There's 30 churches in Hamilton Township.
I don't know what the ultimate impact of that is on the ability to actually have a licensed establishment.
Well,
Yeah.
so look, I just want to make sure I understand. So
Yeah, that would be good.
marijuana distribution facility, as long as it's not within 250 feet of a church, so like the Bank of America building across from St. Vincent's and next to the Methodist Church could be a marijuana distribution center based on this
Yeah,
ordinance.
which part of
Am I
it?
reading that right?
Mhm.
It's not, there's no school around it, so if churches aren't on this list,
I know the recreation, Parks and Recreation were also on that list, right?
Again,
But is a commercial establishment like the trampoline park?
I believe, and again, they're all great questions, and this is the time to ask them and hash them out. Again, let's not let the redevelopment process escape you, because if someone wanted to locate one next to the Leapy Track or Underhill Park, I don't see any scenario where that is going to get past a redevelopment agreement. It would just, the possibility does not exist, so.
no, but it's not, it's in your ordinance, so we know we wouldn't pass it, but the churches aren't. And I'm just thinking of our religious community, and I'm thinking,
The only thing,
Good point.
and I agree with you, when you're looking at the larger houses of worship, but just and I'm thinking this as you're speaking, a church can be anywhere. If your neighbor wants to put a church on their property, we can't do anything about it. They are, as long as they follow the rules to start a church, they can turn their house into a church. That is the one entity that pretty much land use, you're approved any location that you want to be in. But I agree with you when it comes to the larger established houses of worship. I absolutely agree with you. how do we, I mean, again,
I think we'll just-
is it something that we can put, I mean, putting it in here, you may not be able to put them anywhere in town. But again, that would be covered in the redevelopment process. The decision would be made whether the proximity to any church would be acceptable.
In a church.
Yes, and again, without being, I don't have a map, I don't know what the impact would be, so it's difficult to answer whether or not doing that effectively prohibit licensing in the township. So when we originally did this and made the determination on the language, which hasn't changed in terms of those facilities, any church that has a school associated with it, that is covered by this. So that would be one of the larger institutions, I would imagine. So without more information and more of a mapping of the area, I can't say how it would net impact. I'm sure that because of the number of churches in the town and what Mayor Kane just said about they could locate anywhere and open anywhere, that could cause an issue. But it's going to have to be what the committee's preference is. And again, through the redevelopment process, if there's a location that someone chooses that's right next door to a church, committee can say no.
Then I guess I'm confused, because the whole point of the ordinance is to give the committee guidance in whether or not they can approve something. So if a church, if a place came to me and wanted to be co-located next to the Methodist Church on Main Street, I would have no reason to tell them no, based on this ordinance.
Yes, you would. Yes, you would, because they would have to enter into a redevelopment agreement. And in that redevelopment agreement, you could decide whether that was the appropriate location, because you're not going to listen, she just said the regulations are 197 pages. They're probably going to change, and they're going to change again. We're not going to be able to write an ordinance that's going to cover every single thing. But when we enact the redevelopment portion of this, we can then control each application on an individual basis.
Which is what Bob said.
So, if someone came in for Sapala's store wanting to do a retail marijuana establishment next to the church, obviously I would think that the individuals and us would say no to that. I mean, whether we're sitting here or there's another 5 people sitting up here, I would assume that you would say, no, that's not the location. Now, maybe further down on Main Street, if someone wants to have one, maybe you would say yes to that, depending on the proximity.
I mean, you could just say, lots that are immediately adjacent to a church, but I still think that without knowing the impact that that's going to have, it's difficult for me to make that recommendation.
Well, then I could, using this photograph here, I could say lots 1 through 10, I want no marijuana facilities at, because they are literally touching the 250. So when those things came up, when those lots came up for sale and if they were so distributed as marijuana, we could just say no.
Correct.
Okay. The other issue I had, or the other concern I had was, I love the way you phrased the language for the olfactory sensories and stuff. Here was my concern, Emily, and it has to do with our ability to enforce as our town. If after, if the device detects a chemical, a trace chemical that is going to pick up an odor, we give them 48 hours to clean up their act. And if they don't, we suspend them for 10 days with a license, or, we tell them you can't operate for 10 days.
But
Much
then,
like our private roads, suppose this is like their 4th time in. Suppose they just don't get it, they're not getting the memo. I know that we renew their license every year, but is there a way to say, look, we're going to suspend you for 10 days, and if it happens more than twice, we're going to pull your license? Is there a sentence that we can add to the end of this? Because this, to me, is just like, if you do it, we'll slap your hand, and we'll keep slapping your hand, and I'm not seeing the finality of it.
I will have to check on the impact of a municipality suspending a license that's ultimately issued by the state. So they need to have permission to operate in the township, but their state license may not be able to be restricted. I don't know the answer to that. In our redevelopment agreement, however, we would be able to establish regulations for operation. If you get 2 violations in a month, then you agree that you're going to shut down for 10 days. If you get 2 more violations in the next month, it can't continue that way. There can be some other type of penalty that's tied to violations. It's brand new for me, and it's brand new for the committee, so you kind of have to work your way through, and I know.
Let me follow up a question before you. Bob, I don't believe, I think now that we're talking about this, I don't believe that we're going to be able to, as a municipality, suspend a state license. We can't do that. I don't see any, but would we be able to, especially through the redevelopment process, would we be able to write in that if you have violations that aren't corrected, that we could suspend their Merck license here in the township?
Thank you. You can achieve a whole lot more by contract than you can by creating laws. If a party agrees to X in the form of a redevelopment agreement, that's enforceable. So if you have enforcement penalties in place at the time you approve the redevelopment agreement, absent the state regulation saying you don't have authority, then I think it would hold. I haven't studied it. Hopefully I will never have to read all 197 pages of regulations, but that would be my general answer.
Bob, I'm running through a scenario in my head where we've got a manufacturing plant and we're smelling it. And I come to you as a resident and I say, hey, when you take the gun out there and yep, they're smelling it, and you give them their 48 hours to get it cleaned up, and they get it cleaned up, and they don't cleaned up, and next month we're right back at it. Now I'm into the month 6 and I'm getting ready to put my house on the market because y'all can't control the smell. We don't have any teeth in this, and this is the contract that we're gonna hold them under?
No, that's the ordinance. The contract would be the redevelopment agreement.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's what Bob is saying. We have much more control enforcing that than we do enforcing, unfortunately, this or the state regulations that, the state license.
And
So-
and if I might, Aaron just brought over the actual regulation with regard to that, and it says, "A cannabis business shall seek to prevent the escape of odors associated with cannabis over the boundary line of the property. Failure to engage in such an effort may result in sanctions, including civil monetary damage penalties." So they're not even saying that, sanctions, it could be a license suspension, but they don't clearly identify what that is. So the CRC's guidance isn't as clear as it might be, or I would hope it would be. But the redevelopment agreement itself will allow you to explain to any redeveloper who's going to come in and operate any type of business what the penalties are for breach of the obligations.
We don't have a sample contract like that now.
Sample redevelopment agreement?
Yeah.
The township has entered into redevelopment agreements with a number of other entities that you could look at form. But these would be specific to this type of operation. And so we would look at violations that are related to certain concerns that the township has. And, there are in other municipalities where I've worked, they've done ordinances that penalize business owners whose alarms go off too often. Right? And so that's the type of language you can put into your, we're going to hit you where it counts. If we have to come out too many times, you're going to pay us X amount for each violation. And for each violation that continues, it's going to be X amount more.
Let's walk down a path where we
But see, if we
have
keep
an
walking down the
agreement.
path, then we're never going to get to a point where we can introduce an ordinance that if it needs to be amended, as Mrs. Link pointed out, we can amend it again if it's not effective, the ordinance itself. The redevelopment agreement can even be amended if it's not effective. But the redevelopment agreement is where we'll have the teeth, as Mr. Sandman explained, to where we can enforce that contractual agreement with that redeveloper.
All right, so I'm going to walk through an example, and Bob, tell me if in this ordinance, we've got our bases covered. I'm a manufacturer, and I'm making it, and it's doing really good, and I'm making money hand over fist. And you get a whiff out the door, and you come to me, and you go, fine me. Well, I don't care about the fine, because I'm making hand over money. Here's your fine. About 3 months go by, and I've got a mother load that's got to go out for shipment. I already know the odor's going to be out of control. Don't care, I've got to make the money for the fine. So now I'm on my second offense. We're now into month 9, and I'm on my third offense. And you tell me, Sue, I'm going to fine you $10,000 a day, and I go, go ahead, I'm good with this. And I pay you the fine. How do you prevent me from not violating a fourth one?
Because you add in the redevelopment agreement other enforcement tools that would shorten, shut down, temporarily suspend an operation. For
That's what I
repeated
wanted to hear.
violations.
So as long as we have that in the agreement that we can shut us down, then I'm okay with this ordinance. If you don't, we're onto a private road we can't maintain.
Each agreement is going to be negotiated separately. We don't have a form of agreement with a cannabis entity.
But we should have a standardized, if we're going to do 16 of them, we should have an agreed-upon standardized
But-
approach, but that this ordinance sets a precedent.
Yes, I agree with you completely, that we should definitely have those enforcement mechanisms. That's committee's concern, then that's what we should do.
I think you heard that loud and clear. I mean,
Yes.
that is committee's concern. So
Sorry, I
can
beat you up,
can I
yeah.
just
Oh, no,
ask
no.
one scenario to touch on what Sue said? So if the private road that we're talking so much about, if that developer entered into a redevelopment agreement with us, and then that road fell under disrepair, as long as we wrote in the penalties for that happening and the maintenance requirements of that, they wouldn't be able to get away with that, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But that could also be part of a site plan approval
Yes.
where the enforcement of the odor doesn't necessarily get covered by the MLUL and the conditions that you can put on through a planning board approval or a zoning board approval. So that's why the redevelopment process was chosen in this respect, because you can impose those conditions and those penalties where you can't do that under a general planning board or zoning board approval.
So piggybacking off of Sue, I'm not in favor of 250 feet. I think it should stay at 1,000 feet. And that'll be one of the things that will help with this in keeping it far away from the obvious places where people are going to complain about the odor. So I think it needs to stay at 1,000 feet.
Right, so are you talking about the property line itself? or
Property
talking
line
about the
itself.
structure?
Property line itself. I don't want to get into getting a protractor out and trying to figure all this out. Property line itself, 1,000 feet. I mean, are we wanting to sell all this property and make all this money that we're supposedly going to make with marijuana sales over people complaining about the odor at a school? Is it that important?
I mean, I agree with your comments. I mean, we should never approve a project at the peril of the residents surrounding it and/or, a school or something of that nature. I agree with that.
Yeah, I wanted to add that I did not agree with the 250, that I would like to see it at 1,000.
The difference is, again, property line compared to facility difference. And Carl, you made your opinion very clear. I'm of the opinion that the structure being located 1,000 feet from one of the structures that we're referring to would be sufficient, but I'm one member up here. That's my opinion. Because, again, you get out into FA 70 zones, you get out in other zones, you're going to have, property lines that could make property unsaleable or unusable because of that rule. But as long as the facility is tucked back where it can't be seen, can't be done, and, you have to rely on your planning process to make sure that's done properly. I would make the argument that 1,000 foot from the facility would be appropriate, not 250 feet. So I agree with the facility at the 1,000 foot. I don't agree with the property line not being able to be within 250 feet.
I agree with Charles, simply because just say, for instance, the guy or the company has a 100-acre lot, and they're putting up 40,000 square foot. They could be 3,000 feet from the other building, but the property lines touch. And that would make that property unavailable.
So you're saying the 1,000 should be from the actual facility?
Yes.
Yeah, from
I
building
support
to
that.
building.
I absolutely support that. And I have to tell you, one of the questions is, I mean, we are talking about and looking at this property. I believe it will make one of those properties unusable for this purpose. I mean, you know, the 1,000 foot from the facility, I would certainly support that.
On the actual facility.
In this diagram that they've provided for us, the blue lines would indicate 1,000 feet
Correct.
from the Hess property line or the Hess facility.
I believe that's property line,
I believe
correct?
so, yeah, property line.
How about all these
I
drug,
would,
how about all
again, we
these
don't have
drug-free areas?
Bob here to.
Well, again, it's not being consumed. There's no on-site consumption at all.
I know, Emily, but it's an elementary school.
But they
Says
could
it's
drive
1,000
5
feet.
feet,
I
they
don't
could
want my
drive
granddaughter
5
coming out
miles down the
smelling
road
smoke,
and
walks out on the
consume
street.
it,
Don't.
or a mile.
I just, I know, you wouldn't
I'm
either.
not arguing one way or the other.
I know.
I'm just explaining.
But then again,
The optics with the Hess school make me lean toward 1,000 feet, just this diagram here.
you see what I mean? This is the other. But it may, look, this is what I was talking about, right? It may.
Here's another aspect I read about, and this is aside from his, is Atlantic City said that the money for enforcement of people speeding and on the influence of this drug should not go to the police for enforcing it, for enforcing, you know, I don't know why they said that, but I would think all of our expenses have to go on, you know, as a overall, that if we, now you say that there's no consumption of this marijuana or cannabis at the site, but what's to prevent them from going to the next corner and consuming it? All right, now we have, you know, an erratic driver on the road, all right? Now, the police are pulling this person over for, you know, some sort of consumption. Now, does that increase the number of police that we will have in regards to maybe 16 cannabis locations? I don't know. That's a question.
Well, listen, you bring up a valid point. You know, there's no way to tell that. Again, as you said, you make a very good point. They're not allowed to consume it on site, but they can go off-site and consume it. And, you know, the amount of police officers we have goes to the population that we have, the area we need to cover, and of course, the incidences that we have within that area. So yes, to answer your question, if there were so many incidences that the police department got overwhelmed, I'm sure that chief would be calling us and saying, hey, by the way, I need to add more officers.
You feel it now?
But again, if you have a redevelopment agreement with one and we see that there's multiple violations, I believe that the next redevelopment agreement may not even happen because we say, okay, that we have an issue here, and if we build in the safeguards that Sue's talking about to make sure that from a township standpoint, we can shut them down. Not from a state standpoint, but from a township standpoint,
That would be good.
that would make perfect sense.
And they do have to get their license renewed annually at the state level. And so if we are finding that there is a particular licensee who is violating or whose
Egregious in their.
customers are violating, there's a specific location that's 25 feet away from the particular store, that can be documented, and we can show that those people who are violating the law are coming from that facility, then we report that to the state, and they evaluate that as part of their annual license renewal, and they may not get renewed. So there are mechanisms that are in place for an annual review.
Are there other questions on this ordinance for Emily, other than the ones we just covered? So if we take back the issues, if we can take them one by one, from an enforcement standpoint to satisfy Ms. Hopkins, Mr. Sandman, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's of your opinion that if the redevelopment agreement is written correctly, and that there are penalties and/or consequences for violations, that we wouldn't be able to, other than write a letter or when they go up for renewal, as Emily said, but we would be able, if we wrote it properly in the redevelopment agreement, we would be able to take enforcement action to close them down or pull their operating license in the township to get their attention.
More likely than not, unless there's something in the state regulations that takes away that power from the local municipality.
Yeah, you don't know.
That is something that we need to find out. I apologize for that, but that is something we need to know, we need to satisfy the committee members' questions up here, and that's a valid question. I think that the answer is as we put forth, but I think we need to look at the regulations and find out if that is permissible.
And I would say this also, if you're changing the distance, 250, from 1,000 to 250 or less, that is a material alteration of the ordinance.
Well, this is just an introduction. Yeah, this is an introduction, and so we're not, nothing has been actually introduced yet.
So I do not believe, committee can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're going to get to that point this evening. I think we need to discuss these issues, verify that there's no other issues with the ordinance, have it corrected, and bring it back to have the committee decide whether it's palatable for them at that time.
I tend to agree with you. I'm more comfortable with 1,000 feet, but I could go from facility to facility instead of property line.
If you trust the redevelopment process, again, Mr. Vitale and I were just looking at the small blue ribbon. Obviously, this is not scale, but the small blue ribbon would touch on another property, which would make that property, under the current standards we have, it looks like it may intrude, 30 to 50 feet onto that property. That would make that property non-saleable for that use, when it's a very large parcel. So, we took the first issue with being able to shut them down. We're going to get that question answered. We want to be sure that the municipality has total control if they're violating in our town, that there's no state ordinance with this that would supersede us taking action against them violating what we wrote in a redevelopment agreement. The second issue, as I understand it, is the distance of 250 from other facilities, such as schools and daycare centers. What else was written in here?
It's school facility, park and/or recreational facility. That's what's the regulation. And the current ordinance is 1,000 feet. And so we would just remove that section from this amendment, because it would just stay the way it is currently.
When this diagram comes back, could you please indicate the properties that are, I don't want to know the names, I just want to know with the letter M, which facilities we're talking about that are warehouse or whatever in this, around this band? Just lots. Can we do that?
Bob, you have to help us out.
Yeah,
'Cause
I'll work with,
Otherwise, this isn't going to move me. I need to know what I'm talking about here. I'm looking at lots 1 through 10 right now that skirt along this, that are within the county complex buffer.
I will work with Bob's office, Mr. Sandman's office, and
I don't need to know anything. I don't need to know who's buying them or anything.
we could just let you know which ones are under letter of intent.
Yeah, just put an M, so I know that that's a consideration for that particular, because then I think qualitatively and quantitatively, we can make a decision. I think right now, I'm not-
So the third issue was the amount of licenses. Was that question answered to your satisfaction, Mrs. Lane?
Are you, we're going to leave it at 4 and then be discriminating? Is that the idea?
Well, your choice of words is not accurate. It's not discriminating. I mean, it's a redevelopment agreement for an individual piece of property, and it wouldn't be discriminatory in nature. I mean, if someone wants to come in and do business, they entered into that agreement, we then have to be comfortable with where it is, how it's built, and what the restrictions are, and what,
Under the redevelopment?
correct. As Mr. Salmon pointed out, we can cover all that in the contractual phase, which is enforceable more so than the ordinance phase.
Okay, so it's allowing us freedom, so to speak, and then our restrictions would come from the actual redevelopment.
Correct, yes. So there are two questions that need to be answered to the satisfaction of the committee. I would ask committee if there's any other questions of the ordinance that we ask them now, so that, I like Ms. Gibbons, but she's on the clock, so she's ticking. So we're paying her as she sits here. So if there are no other ordinance, I know that everyone has read through this because these are all valid questions. Ms. Gibbons, if we can get the answers to these, and we will list this, get an advance copy to whatever changes we may need, and let's list this for the next meeting.
The 18th. And I just so committee is aware, you authorized an RFP for the cannabis licenses that was due back on the 20th of April, and so not taking action to introduce and then have the public hearing on the 18th, then we're going to have to do something, and Mr. Koseki could probably help you figure out whether, you need to just extend that deadline, which I think is probably
I
the
am
most
aware of
appropriate
that,
thing.
but with all due respect, we have to get this right.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that that is something that committee has to take into consideration tonight, and make that extension.
All right, so committee, are we in agreement?
Yep.
All right, with that being said, is there any other questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion to table until the following meeting. I have a motion by Mrs. Hopkins. I have a second by Mr. Vitale. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, committee. Good discussion.
And Mayor Kane, there is a resolution on your consent agenda referring this ordinance over to the planning board, and you will not need to take action on that this evening either.
Okay.
That's letter K.
Letter K. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to 6, awards, bids and contracts / change orders.
5B,
No.
5B.
Oh, forgive me. I put a star next to it, Harry. I wanted to make sure that Mr. Rogers' questions were answered on this. We'll move on to B, ordinance 1988-2022, an ordinance by the Township Committee amending the Hamilton Township Code of Ordinances to repeal Chapter 173 flood damage prevention, to adopt a new Chapter 173 floodplain management, sections 1 to 17, to adopt flood hazard maps, and to designate a floodplain administrator, and providing for severability and an effective date. Joe?
Sir, this is just our professional services as needed. It's essentially under our engineering for floodplain management. So it doesn't add any additional staff or any costs. It's as-needed services.
So to answer Mr. Rogers' questions, I want to make sure that we answer. I know, do you need him to re-ask the question, or?
This is just updating our floodplain management ordinance and establishing a professional to handle those, and it would be under our engineering. Is there any specific questions along that, Mr. Rogers?
Is my house on?
Okay.
Thank you for your question, Harry. So with that, committee, do you have any additional questions or comments?
Just that if a individual wants to know if their, you know,
Properties
a
affected.
property is in a flood zone, get a hold of Joe.
I'll get a hold of our engineers.
Joe, would you write your cell number and?
Yes, absolutely.
Marker, and I'll just leave it up here for the camera.
1-800.
Are there any other questions or comments? We have one committee member that stepped away for a moment. I just want to make sure he doesn't have any questions or comments for it.
Well, let me ask a question of Joe.
There you go.
So with the dam, I know I can kill time, I'm good at this. With the dam, you know, once the dam is all fixed, the floodplain is gonna change.
No.
Not necessarily.
We don't think we'll have less flooding areas?
Well, that's a different type of flooding. The flooding that we're talking about are the maps that are adopted by FEMA.
Okay,
So whatever happens at the dam, that's not going to affect those maps.
okay. The FEMA maps that you're making changes to or updating, will that result in a savings to the taxpayers at all? Like, will they be maybe designated no longer in a
Well, that
flood
all
zone?
depends on what FEMA ends up changing it. I've dealt with some towns where FEMA changes actually hurt areas. I've had other ones where the FEMA changes help concerns. Usually when it comes to whether or not homeowners can save money, it really comes down to what your number ends up being. So the more you guys put in place to prevent flooding, whether it be through construction, through the adoption of the maps, you can get reductions in people's flood insurance, depending on what your rating ends up being.
Okay,
For instance, I'm in Avalon, they've got a high rating, I think they'd get a 25 or 30% discount for homeowners.
thank you.
Committee, any other questions or comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second.
Second?
Again, the public hearing will be held on April 18, 2022. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we'll move on to 6, awards of bids, contracts, and change orders. We have A, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 for bid 2019-13, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning to Peterson Services Company in the amount of $1,595, adding the MISPA annex to the contract work performed. Committee?
Motion.
I have a
Second.
motion.
Second?
I have a second. Rita, can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor King?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
All right, we'll move on to B, resolution awarding bid 2022-01A. This is a contract for turf maintenance for the Township of Hamilton to True Green LP. Base bid $25,234 plus $100 an hour and a 41.9% markup for additional work as needed. I understand this is to fertilize our fields. We need to be ensured that no additional work will be needed. Any other questions or comments, committee?
41.9% markup.
Again, we need to make sure that there's no additional work that is needed. And I trust that, I see a smile in the back of the room, so I trust that we won't have an issue with that, so. But we do need to get the fertilizer down, and so. Committee, if there's no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Link,
Second.
a second by Ms. Hopkins. Rita, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor King?
All right, now we will move on to 6C. 6C is,
Millennium Strategies?
6C, resolution authorizing acceptance of proposal for grant writing services, Millennium Strategies LLC, amount not to exceed $10,000. Joe?
Yes, sir. This is the grant management firm that we are going to be utilizing in conjunction with our engineers for the fiscal year 23 appropriations that we've mentioned for the recreational. I'd like to thank Mr. Vitale for working with me on this, and Congressman Van Drew's office. We potentially have the ability to apply and get $1 million worth of recreation funds, and this grant services funds will help us tie a bow on this application. We have less than 2 weeks to get this submitted, and we will do it.
And I understand there's going to be some petitions that will be solicited
Yes.
for signatures, so if you're asked to sign that, I would appreciate if you would, and this entire committee would appreciate if you would do that quickly so that we can get the support needed, so that we can entertain receiving another grant for, what, you said $1 million?
That's the target fund, 1 million, yes.
$1 million, so that's your township committee and your administration to work, trying to save you as much money as we can while we do the things that are necessary for our community.
I was going to say you didn't say that million loud enough.
1 million.
So with that, is there any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Vitale.
Second.
Second by Mr. Cheek. Rita, roll call, please.
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
Good job, Terry.
Okay, next, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have items A through J. We,
Want to take out
Take out
E.
E.
yes, I have it marked. A through J, and then L through O. Does anyone have any questions on
A
that?
through D,
Say that again.
and pick up, this is
What
the
are you
only one on
taking
there.
out?
So we're taking out E.
B.
No, you're on, no, it should be K, right? E we're good with.
Okay.
It should be K.
Yeah, K.
So this is what Harry wants to discuss.
Yeah, K.
Okay, so, I apologize, and
Unless we
you're right.
want to take Harry now, and
No,
then,
let's take it this way. A through D, F through J, and L through O. Are we good with that? Perfect. If so, I'll consider a motion.
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 I have a
Second.
motion by Mr. Cheeks, second by Mrs. Link. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll move on to E. This is a resolution amending Resolution 2022-0062, a resolution confirming the official cash management plan for the Township of Hamilton. Joe or Cynthia?
E, 7E.
Oh, 7E.
Committee, this established the amendment to the cash management plan to include the acceptance of credit cards. The original cash management plan that was adopted on the reorg meeting said electronic transfer. I'm just being more distinctive by saying credit cards, and we are accepting credit cards for beach tags currently. That's what we're going to initiate once you approve this.
Mr. Rogers, I asked, does that answer your question?
I have a question. Would this be by phone as well?
No, they have to be in-site, on person. We're going to put a terminal on the police records so people can come and buy beach badges and pay by credit card. Currently, they can do it online through our WIP program. They can do that now, pay their taxes on WIP, and they can also pay their beach badges using WIP. But now we're going to install an actual terminal so they can come at the window and use credit cards. This will also start the process going for other offices to accept credit cards as well.
Okay, thank you.
The cost for the credit cards, is that negligible?
The fees are passed on to the consumer.
Okay.
All right, committee, any other questions or comments? If not, I'll consider a motion for E, please.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion by Mr. Vitale, second by Mrs. Link. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll move on to K. I'll entertain a motion to remove K in table K at this time. This goes hand in hand with the ordinance that we just discussed that we tabled to the next meeting.
Okay.
Committee, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Talley, second by Mrs. Link. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Next, we'll move on to 8, personnel. A, resolution appointing Sarah Duffy as contact person and Joseph Koseki as an additional contact person for the employment practices liability attorney consultation service.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Hopkins,
Second.
second by Mr. Cheek. Rita, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
All yes and carry.
Next, if it, committee, if it pleasures you, I'd like to take B, C, and D together. We can simply entertain a motion as these resignations have already been accepted by the respective boards.
So moved.
I'll move, motion by Ms. Hopkins,
Second.
second by Mr. Cheek. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, we'll move on to approvals. Minutes, regular meeting minutes, March 1st, 2022.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Vitale,
Second.
second by Ms. Hopkins. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Next, we'll move on to B, minutes, executive session meeting minutes of March 21, 2022.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Vitale,
Second.
a second by Mr. Cheek. Rita, can we get a roll call on that, please?
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
All yes and carry.
All right, next, we're going to move on to the bill list. I would like to pull 22-00292, CPR training for $300 to Tracy Kane. That happens to be my sister. Although I appreciate how much she does, I will not be voting on that. So with that, the bill list total will be $762,663.87 minus $300.
And
Great.
I'd like to pull our E. Pearson materials.
So we're going to pull 22-0292, and we're going to pull Pearson. I saw that one here, and that was...
$683.20.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion with both of those excluded. Committee?
So moved.
I have a motion. Well, I figured you'd take a $700,000 one.
Yeah.
Motion by Mr. Talley,
Second.
second by Mr. Cheek. Rita, roll call, please.
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
All yes and carry.
All right, next we'll consider 22-00292, as I described it earlier.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Talley,
Second.
second by Mr. Cheek. Rita, can we get a roll call, please?
And this is on the $300?
Yes.
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Abstain. Next, we'll move on to R.E. Pearson. Rita, would you restate the amount, please? You had that there?
Yeah, Richard E. Pearson, $683.20.
Committee, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Cheek,
Second.
second by Mrs. Link. Rita, can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Abstain.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 abstention, motion
All
carries.
right, now we'll move on to reports. Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Just touching base, again, recapping on the Millennium Strategies aspect. The Township was informed about a potential increase in fiscal year '23 federal appropriations in the Economic Development Initiative under the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and that Leapy Park Recreation Complex expansion qualifies as a potential project. We have focused Township priority over the last week because of potential receipt of these funds and limited time frame to submit this grant application. Our office has a soft deadline to submit by April 15th. Additionally, these funds must be obligated by October 1st of '23. This is a very large coordinated effort in a very short amount of time. We are coordinating with Township departments and the MLAA to solidify park needs at Leapy. and coordinating letters of support for this project from multiple organizations, residents, sports organizations, civic organizations, et cetera. At the same time, we are engaging our township professionals for project planning and permitting. Additionally, we engage Millennium Strategies and a grant firm by this committee to tie this whole thing together within this short time frame. Additionally, we are also exploring additional ways to assist businesses recover and grow within the township, including outdoor dining legislation, which is sunsetting in November, and we're exploring other options as well.
Thank you. Bob?
Nothing.
It's always good when you have nothing.
It is.
We appreciate it. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing we really have is Third Street's kind of slowing up a little bit now until after school gets out. A lot of concrete work's done. Right now, Third Street is kind of slowing up until school's done on the 24th of June, because we don't want to interrupt a lot of the school buses. So at that point, you might not see a whole lot of activity, some minor stuff here, but that's about it.
All right, thank you. Township Committee, Mrs. Link?
Well, watching TV nonstop, it's hard to watch the Ukraine devastation. And I see a lot of moms, grandmoms, children that will be forever impacted. And I just reflect upon my experience, even during the pandemic, well, it's still here with us. I had the opportunity to do online teaching with my granddaughter and grandson. And just recently, my granddaughter gave me a mug that said, "Grandmother, a little bit parent, a little bit teacher, and a little bit best friend." Nothing could be better than that. So that's my comment for today. Hopefully, we will get past this war in the Ukraine, and they will be saying the same thing. I'm sure they are.
Very nice comments, Mrs. Link, thank you. Mr. Talley?
Our community lost a bit of a legend this past week. Mr. Tobias, as a lot of you know, was the band director at Oakcrest for 50 years. I wasn't in the band. I was one of the ones who called them band nerds. But Mr. Tobias knew me very well, because back in our day, you could buy candy from the band people. So after lunch, I'd run over to the band room and buy my candy, and he would laugh at me, and I would tell him and his people were nerds, but whatever. I envy all the band people, because looking back at it, they did do the most traveling out of anybody. So they did get to see literally see the world. My cousins back in the 70s, they went to Europe with the band. So that shows you, nowadays they don't go they're going to Nashville. In fact, they leave Wednesday to go to Nashville for a few days. My girlfriend's daughter is in the band. So I am now a band parent. So kind of comes around full circle, and it is what it is. But Mr. Tobias was a good guy. I mean, he all of his students that he mentored, I think for the most part, they were all pretty darn successful. And it says a lot. So sad to see him go. Really good guy, and really cared for everybody. We had, the green team had a big cleanup over at New York Avenue Pit 2 Saturdays ago. How many tons? Almost 5 tons of trash was taken out of that pit.
5 tons?
5 tons.
Wow.
Tires, sofas, beds, bureaus, yeah. We could have furnished a whole house. It's really sad to see that stuff goes back there, but kudos to everybody. The ACUA, they had someone there and they were giving out all the trash bags, and they had a dumpster there. Public Works obviously had the backhoe out there. Without that backhoe, we would have never gotten all that stuff out of there. But did a really nice job. And then kind of going off of that, some emails were going back and forth about, because that property is owned by the New Jersey Land Trust. And so they've been, the Green Team, more Denise Applegate, has been working with them, trying to get them to give us some more help to try to block the accesses in there, because it's really only supposed to be walking paths back there. And, but we all know that there's off-road vehicles, there's quads, motorcycles, all kinds of stuff. I sent an email to our state senator, Vince Palestina. One of his people got back to us. We have a meeting set up. We're going to try to get them, and it sounded like they were already in agreement to reimburse us for what it cost us on Saturday, which that didn't cost us money. That came from grants of our own. But I'd rather see the grants that we have used to clean up our property, not the state's property. I mean, you know, it's nice that we get out there and do this, but I'd rather see us cleaning up, you know, different areas of our town, which did happen on Saturday, thanks to Luann. And I don't think you got that big of a response this past Saturday, but every Saturday this month, are we meeting out at the same place? Okay. The MISPA Annex, 10 o'clock on Saturday. And then we will scatter out from there and start cleaning up some areas out in the western part of the township. So great job to everybody, the ACUA, like I said, the police department, everybody who came out. It was a really good day, and got a lot of stuff cleaned up, and let's keep going the rest of this month. And that's all I have. Reagan, Maddie, miss you, love you, hope to see you soon.
Good comments, thank you. Ms. Hopkins?
Do you want me to tell you about the dog park? Look at that, nobody's interested. Okay, so we found the location for the dog park, and it's been approved. It's going to be right outside the lighthouse, Atlantic City Park East, Atlantic County Park West. It's east, it's, okay. It's right outside the lighthouse. There's some open space out there. We're going to identify that as a dog park. So you're going to see me starting to formulate a dog park committee, and Joe, I'd like to use that Planet Civic as a pilot project for the dog park, so I'll get with you, and we're going to do some dog surveys, and we're going to start the process, if you will. If we don't have to go through Pinelands, I have a target date of October to get it done. We are starting to take donations, and you'll see me stand that up. We're starting to move some funds in order and stuff. If we do have to go through Pinelands, we're probably looking at next spring, but we're going to move fast on it. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to give me a call on my cell at 609-703-6002. Woof, we got this.
Sue, I just want to say, great work on that. I have to tell you, I had the pleasure of seeing the amount of effort that Ms. Hopkins has put into this, and it is absolutely unbelievable. And I got to be honest with you, I thought a dog park is someplace you go, you let them off the leash, it's fenced in, but this is going to touch on a lot of different recreational aspects for the community, for seniors, for possibly disabled, and many, many other things. And I didn't realize until I had the opportunity to sit with her and go through the plan how many different areas it can impact. And she has actually gotten me extremely excited about it. So appreciate all your work, and I look forward to the day that we open it up. So thank you.
I was going to make a comment. My niece, Dawn Zimmer, lost a father-in-law because he went walking through Hoboken. He got killed, and the dog continued to live. And this got her involved in city government in Hoboken to a point where she was the mayor of Hoboken for 8 years. So I'm sure she has a lot of information about dog parks too. So maybe you could reach out to Dawn Zimmer and see what she has to say.
I would suggest that you pass Ms. Zimmer's information on to Ms. Hopkins. Ms. Hopkins' information on to Ms. Zimmer and have her reach out to her.
Judy, we're looking for volunteers for that dog park if you're in. It'll be fun. It's going to be, we're hoping about 4 to 6 acres. It's going to be a wooded area. It's going to be open field. We're going to have splash pools for one of the smaller dogs. We're going to have the scouts. We're hoping to get the scouts to coordinate some of the agility tracks. We're looking at cleaning out a little bit of the forest area so you have a hiking trail to go through with the dogs. We're also looking at, believe it or not, a sensory garden for the dogs. You ever have a dog and they go outside, they eat grass, sometimes dandelions, it's because their stomach's upset. So we're going to try to put in a little garden, like a circular type Zen garden, where if the dogs wander through there, if their stomachs are upset, it won't hurt them.
I didn't understand it either, so I mean.
Right outside the, you know where the Lighthouse Park is?
I know where Lenape Park East is, and I know where Lenape Park West is, but I'm confused, there's not.
Do you know where the lighthouse is?
Of course I do.
Good,
Still
okay.
there. It's still
Right
there.
outside that lighthouse, there's a big open field, and that's where we're going to put
Okay,
the
Ms.
dog
Dix,
park.
please.
You're not talking about the lighthouse at Lenape Park?
Yes,
are
ma'am,
you?
I am.
Oh.
Yep,
So you're saying put the dog park off of Park Road?
yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's just down the street.
All right, Mr. Cheek? Thank you, Ms. Hopkins.
I echo Mrs. Link's thoughts on the war in Ukraine. I'm sure everyone's thinking about that. And then also, I really don't have much to say. Happy Easter to everyone. We'll have Easter in less than 2 weeks. That's it.
Fantastic. All right, first point, I want to compliment Joe, the Recreation Committee, those involved, and Congressman Van Drew for always looking out for our community. He's a special individual, and he cares a lot about South Jersey. We're seeing and reaping the benefits of that right now. Joe, where were these petitions? Is there a place where we're going to post them that
Yes, so I'm working with Captain Alcott. We'll be pushing out on Nixle with a specific link that we use for the online petitions, and we'll also have other ones going out through social media. So we will have a large social media coordinated effort to turn it all around.
So please, once again, we're under a very tight time crunch here. I can't tell you what $1 million means to our community, so please encourage your neighbors or friends to sign it as quickly as possible, get it back so we can get this applied for in very short order. Next, I just want to mention the Township Municipal Alliance Committee is sponsoring a free walking program called Walking for Wellness. It's that time of year again. It's a walking program for adults 50 and over. With all due respect, you don't get carded, so if you're 48 and you want to walk, you're more than welcome to. This 6-week program is held on Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. from April 16th to May 21st, and it starts at the bike path across from Woodview Estates. Walking with a partner or group will help motivate you to stick to your walking program. You can reach out to 609-457-7899 to get more information. I do understand that I believe the group that attended last year ended up getting Fitbits. I don't know what type of thing you'll be enticed with this year, but if it's something you want to do, or you know someone might want to take advantage of it, please let them know about it. Next, I'll move on to the LSV community. Chief, you give us an update, or maybe tell us when we can expect one?
Next meeting.
Next meeting. So next meeting, we can expect an update on converting Hamilton Township into an LSV community. I appreciate your work, Chief, and of course, Sergeant Smith's work. So I look forward to that update. With that, I have nothing else. I will now open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak? Mr. Carrigan.
I have a question. Oops. I have a question for Cynthia. About the credit cards.
You have to talk
Will
into
the
the
tax
mic.
collector get one too?
Jim, you have to talk into the mic.
Currently, people can pay their taxes online using a credit card.
I mean, you're talking about something different though.
Right now, we're just going to stay with the WIP program
Okay.
for taxes.
Okay. Yeah, I usually pay mine by check. And Carl, I couldn't make it yesterday due to the rain.
Okay.
So I really wanted to come yesterday, but
No comment.
Yeah, it rained, so.
Comment.
Okay,
Appreciate you, Jim.
okay. Thanks a lot.
Is there anyone else in the public that wishes to speak? Seeing none, I'll entertain the
You got
motion.
one over there.
I
Got one over
apologize.
there.
Forgive me, I did not see you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Giblin. A little too close there, it's kind of hot.
Couldn't hear the name.
My wife, Caroline, and I are,
I'm sorry, I couldn't catch your name.
yeah, Giblin, Giblin.
Thank you.
We were both raised in Hamilton Township. I went to Shaner, I went to Hess, I went to St. Vincent, she went to St. Vincent's and Oakcrest, and we're prospective cannabis business owners. And we've been living and breathing those 200 pages of content that we were talking about for the last 13 months. And it's intense, and there's a lot there. And having the benefit of that experience, I thought I'd share just a little bit of that with you. So we talked about a limit of 37 businesses. That's not entirely accurate. It's 37 Class 1 cultivation licenses. So that doesn't include the micros. It doesn't include retailers, doesn't include dispensaries, manufacturers, distributors, or delivery services. So that number is not entirely accurate, and it also expires in February of 2023. So I wanted you to have that full information when you're considering what to do here. In addition to that, in regards to odor and smell, a lot of that is very passive. So we're planning to be a cultivation business in the industrial park. And the way you mitigate smell is with carbon filters. So you put them up on the ceiling all throughout the building, and you have an air handler that's just cycling air around and around and around and around and around. So short of an absolute power failure that's going on for days, you're really not going to have odor issues, and anything that's leaving the building is packaged. So you're not going to have a lot of aroma escaping those packages. What else? Agricultural land is not permitted, so you're talking about the farmlands in the west potentially converting over. That's not allowed by the state. So if somebody wanted to use agricultural land to grow on, they'd have to convert it to some other use. They'd have to convert to industrial or something like that, or commercial. And then finally, in terms of distances, I have a map I can share with you. I have been doing my own research to figure out what property I wanted to pick in the industrial park. I had to map out 1,000 feet all the way around all the property lines, and I did it from the boundaries of the parcels and not from the facility. So I can share that if that would be of value. That's all.
I would like to see it, so if you could, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, I'll bring that to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public that wishes to speak?
Ooh, can I ask him a question?
Sure.
Are you familiar with the olfactory, the field olfactory devices that they're using to do the trace detection?
So I've looked at those devices. There's only one or two manufacturers that even make them. Frankly, it seems like a little bit of pseudoscience. I know that there are other cities in the nation, Denver is a notable one, that have implemented regulations around those. I don't think they're any more objective than somebody's own nose. So there's not a parts per million or parts per billion of the scents that are in the air that can be detected with those systems. So I don't think they're fantastic. But again, you need to protect the community, and I certainly don't want anything escaping our facility and making it down to Hess. And that's absolutely something that we're taking very, very seriously.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, good to go. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else in the public that wishes to speak? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Talley,
Second.
second by Ms. Hopkins. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Next, we will be going into executive session where we will discuss McCormick LLC and cybersecurity. We will reserve the right. We may or may not be coming back out in the public to take action. We will. We will be coming back out in public to take action. Yep. All right.
Will, I need a motion and a second and pass this
Can I get a motion
resolution.
to go into executive session, please?
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Be it resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Hamilton that this meeting be adjourned to an executive session to
Joe?
discuss the following matters. People are so rude. Which are exempt from public discussion pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law. McCormick 106 LLC, attorney-client privilege, potential settlement, cybersecurity and insurance coverage, attorney-client privilege. Be it further resolved that the governing body will reconvene in public session to confirm the results of the executive session. Be it further resolved that the results of the executive session shall be made known as soon as the basis for confidentiality is no longer confidential.
Yeah. Yeah, dead north.
Yes, we're recording.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to return to public portion. I'm sorry, the regular meeting.
So moved.
Motion,
Second.
second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, at this point, we are back in regular session, and it is our intent to take action this evening on the executive matter, settlement matter for McCormick 106 LLC. Bob, do we have to put the terms of that, or are we good with saying that we've accepted the settlement offer and want to move?
Yeah, Bob.
At this point, we'll be accepting the offer as it is written in the settlement agreements
And authorizing the mayor to sign it.
and authorizing myself to sign the same.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Rita, could I get a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Cheek?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mr. Patali?
Yes.
Mayor Kane?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
All right, at this point, we will open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak? Seeing none?
Close.
I have a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'll entertain a motion to close, please.
So
Motion.
moved.
Motion, second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Adjourn. Thank you.